everyone. I'm Megan with the I Believe podcast, and today we have an amazing guest. We have Dr. Jason Frishman here, and Jason, we are so excited to have you. Welcome.
Thank you so much. You and I have been talking or emailing for a little while. I've been really looking forward to this conversation.
Me too. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. Well, I've been part of a nonprofit private practice here in Burlington, Vermont for about 17 years. So as a psychologist, I see mostly I used to joke and say it's a boys to men practice, which dates me a little bit, but we'll see if your listeners get that joke. But anyway, so I've been working and really passionate about men's issues, men's health, men's mental health, and the combination or the connection between mental health and physical health. And about 6 years ago, in addition to my practice, I started a men's coaching program called JourneyMen that's specifically for fathers. And with that coaching practice, we're building a community of dads who kind of care, who really want to build stronger connections between them and their kids, their partners, themselves, and their communities.
I love that. So tell us a little bit about how you approach that, because I'm sure that's pretty hard to crack that code.
Sure. The hardest piece is really getting dads to raise their hand and seek this out or join that. The myth or the meme that, men are really hard to engage in this sort of wellness, growth, and development, I try to not believe it. But there's a part that's really true. And so engaging guys tends to be a challenge. However, once they're involved, it's really powerful. Guys, I've had guys who have gone through the program multiple times, who are, one man who told me, I joined specifically so I'd have a better relationship with my teenage daughter. And now I do. And I'm more in love with my wife than I ever have been before. And so it's a really powerful experience. And really what we're doing is we're looking to help guys really identify and understand the guiding sort of stories in our culture that have been models for our masculinity, for our fatherhood, for our manhood, right? How do we do this? And we really challenge it. So in JourneyMen, there's a little bit of a social action and social justice bent, a service bent, because, as I say, a connected father is a social activist. We are changing the world. And so the way we do that is really questioning this sort of epic, legendary requirement for men that we've got to be out there battling dragons and, getting treasure in these epic adventures. And so what we do is we talk about building what I call foundational adventures. And in the foundational adventures, there's the everyday. All of these actions, all of these things, right? We've got to do dishes, we've got to clean the bathroom, we've got to do all these things. And if we're imbuing and we're seeing how to have our own values and our meaning making expressed in these everyday sort of mundane actions, then every day is an adventure that brings along treasure and excitement and risk. And the biggest lesson is, even when we're in the muck, when we're struggling, whether it's physically, whether it's emotionally, relationally, in that is where we get to live our values, build meaning, and actually find the rewards and treasures that we're looking for in our everyday.
That is an amazing way to put that. I love that, and it's so true. So for JourneyMen, is that a virtual thing? Can you do it anywhere, or does it have to be local?
Oh, it is absolutely, it's all virtual. My practice, my psychology practice is based in Vermont, and even that actually is all virtual. We're all telehealth right now. But the JourneyMen program, what's wonderful is I have guys from all over the country, actually from 2 other countries. I'm now international, which is lovely. And we have a membership program where guys who join based on their schedules and hours, they're put into a small group, and that small group meets virtually every 2 weeks. In addition, there is we have a curriculum, so every month there's a theme. So once a month I put on, or I invite a guest to put on a workshop based on the theme. And those themes are run through our small group, sessions. And then every guy is invited to both a private text thread and a group. There's a private text thread for their small groups and then one for the entire community where the conversations can continue. I like to say that I am privy to in-depth, meaningful conversations over text that most people don't get to see men doing anywhere. And it's a beautiful experience.
Absolutely. I'm sure that's a great way to bond with each other. And I'm sure you do just create like a brotherhood.
Absolutely. It's interesting. I'm actually looking for a different word than brotherhood, but that's really it. It is the idea that we as men are looking for connections. And we've been taught for generations that we don't need it. We're okay. We don't, a lot of JourneyMen was built after I had an experience back when I was in an office doing therapy where I had a man spent the first 15 minutes of his session telling me about this great weekend he had with his buddies in the woods, doing all the things that, guys might do out in the woods, camping. And then he got quiet and his face fell. And he said, if my wife left me, though, I'd have nobody to tell. And number one, in and of itself, that's heartbreaking. And number two, quite literally on the other side of my office door, and I know because he's been a client forever and he's always early, so quite literally sitting on the other side of my door was another man that if I could open the door and say, you two talk, they'd actually have less need for the therapeutic experience with me because they've connected. And that's another reason why I went to like a coaching online model, because I can now do that. I can now metaphorically open the door and say, you two should talk. And that's happened. One male in my group put out, a request for support. Another guy who they had never met wrote back and said, I had that same thing happen in my house. Here's my phone number. And they had a wonderful 2-hour conversation and have stayed in touch since. And so, I think what happens is that when we're going through life, when we're going through the daily struggles, sure, significant clinical issues, a therapist is wonderful. But in my career, I've been doing this for over 25 years. The vast majority of men that I have seen, they're in my office doing therapy, having powerful sessions. And then the moment they walk out, they're back into a community and a culture that doesn't support the kind of growth they're looking to do, that they need to do, that we all need. And so, barring significant mental health issues, significant clinical issues, the coaching model that I'm providing is about building community and a brotherhood, like you said. And that is what helps their health, their mental health, their physical health, the idea of having a supportive and accountable group of men who are on similar journeys, and yet we're not best friends. We're showing up for one another. It's not the buddies that, maybe these guys will become friends in a different way and go out and spend that time in the woods together, and that'd be lovely. But they're not just your friends. These are your other journeymen who will hold your feet to the fire, who will really remind you to do the thing you said you're going to do. I have found that's been incredibly invaluable for these men and growth producing for the work they do.
Absolutely. And I think JourneyMen is the perfect name because they are on that journey together. So I think you came up with the perfect name.
Thank you. I'm at my core, in my training and in my own sort of life's perspective, I'm a narrative therapist. So I trained in something called narrative therapy. And that, without getting all into that, part of that is the language we use, the stories that we use, that builds and supports and creates the reality we live in. So language is really important. I'm touched that you said that about JourneyMen. There's a lot of wordplay in that title. JourneyMen is, like, for example, like you said, they're all on that same journey. They're all on a fatherhood journey. But the vast majority of men's programs uses something called the hero's journey as a model. And the hero's journey, if you don't know, you'll recognize because it's part of, almost every Pixar movie, Star Wars movies, Lord of the Rings. It's the hero goes off and climbs the mountain and battles a dragon and comes back with the treasure and saves the universe, right? That story is everywhere and people use it. And in the research that I've done, I have seen that it's actually problematic and I think almost damaging to men and boys. Because if we're not epic, if we're not battling dragons, if we're not legendary, who are we? And so I've had men in my office say, I'm just an everyday schlub. I'm not epic. I'm not this. And so part of what JourneyMen did, or what the curriculum that I've built with JourneyMen is about saying that's not the only way to adventure, right? When the hero's off battling dragons, first of all, how did the hero get that way? There's a foundation, right? They learned skills and values and things were passed down and all of that. So that foundational adventure has been missing in our culture. And so everyone, but particularly in my work, boys and men, aren't being given these foundational elements. And so we step it back and we say, before we go battling dragons, let's introduce your own imps, the little stuff that messes things up inside. And how do we create everyday daily journeys? And so I'm very explicit. Your big adventure, your big journey is being a dad and a man with your family, not with us. With us, you get to step in. I call it a virtual inn. We have gatherings in our virtual inn. You get to step in the inn, drop your shoulders, and be you, and get supported and share your story and learn new skills, or get some information from the weird guy in the corner. However it goes, that they're all on a journey, but they're on their own journeys. They just come together to give each other and receive support. So it also harkens back, in the sort of European apprentice master sort of guild system for artisan work. There was, in between apprentice and master, there was what's called a journeyman. And a journeyman was good enough not to be apprenticed, but not good enough to be a master. And they worked on daily things. If I'm a blacksmith, I'm going to make things 100 million times. And they were given the opportunity to go off to neighboring villages or neighboring towns, ply their trades, but then come back. And to me, this is the essence of sort of masculinity and fatherhood is, yes, we do have to go somewhere but we're going to come back and perfect our everyday actions, because that's really the art and the beauty of living as a father, as a man, is to be able to serve the people whom we love and whom we care about, as well as ourselves, including ourselves.
Yes, and I would just like to add that as a parent, sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is count to 5 and talk calmly and not blow your top and scream. And if you do that, you're not just a schlub, you are doing the work.
100%.
Aura Biosciences is a clinical stage biotechnology company focused on developing precision therapies for solid tumors that aim to preserve organ function. Our lead candidate, Belsar, is currently in late-stage development for primary choroidal melanoma and in early-stage development in other ocular oncology indications and bladder cancer. Our mission is to grow as an innovative global oncology company that positively transforms the lives of patients. For more information, please visit us at aurabiosciences.com.
You say count to 5. My favorite story, I was actually just telling someone recently, the whole parenting thing of counting, I'm going to count to 3, right? And my favorite answer, because I had a client once ask me, well, what happens if you count to 3 and they don't do what you need them to do? I said, best answer, right? You say, I'm going to count to 3, and they go, so what? I'm not going to do it. What are you going to do? Well, after I count to 3, I'm going to take a breath, and I'll probably count to 3 again and hope you make a better choice. And that's it, right? Like, we're going to keep doing that, because that's the kind of thing, like, as a parent in general, but as a father, we don't have to parent through dominance and control and power. As a man, we do not need to live in a time of dominance and power and control. That's certainly not gotten us anywhere. From our families all the way up to our national stuff, which we don't necessarily have to fully get into right now. But as men, we have a real opportunity and responsibility to work as partners.
I love that. It's so true that everyday journey, that's where the hero pops up. You don't have to go on a big quest and do some great epic thing. Just showing up every day, that's epic.
Absolutely, 100%. And you get this opportunity. And if we look at that definition, you get to be a hero multiple times a day. You know, that's a nicer thing. And it's challenging. I mean, that's the thing is it's hard. You know, it's hard to show up like that. It's hard, you know, if you've got health issues, if you've got overwhelming stressors in life, it's really hard to then take care of the little things. And yet, if we flip that and say, let's focus on the little things, the big stuff, it doesn't fall into place. It doesn't just get better, but you're more prepared for it, right? So I say, like, if we lean into these foundational adventures, we have a stronger place to stand when things get hard because our foundation is solid.
Yeah, that's so important.
It's wonderful and it's beautiful to watch, especially, you know, I've been doing this for a few years now and I've had guys who've been with me for a long time. I've had the honor, really, to like watch guys utilize the language and the terminology and the stories from JourneyMen and then build it into their everyday lives, right? And then like truly go through life's challenges in a way that helps them say, you know what? Foundationally, I'm going to be all right. Even if they're worried about health stuff or financial stuff or, you know, relational stuff or those kinds of things. Really powerful experiences that I was able to witness is one of the guys in my program a few years back went through a divorce. And what he said to me was using the sort of skills and strategies and just support from JourneyMen, he came through that divorce and he and his ex-partner are co-parenting in a way that like, it made me cry hearing about it. It was beautiful. And he was like, that never would have happened. Right. And it's just from these little everyday like awarenesses and understanding our own, that our values, this is something I like to talk a lot about, is that our own values, when we make them actionable and specific, almost visible, then we can live them in our everyday. And they are both the directions that we have to go, right? If I know my values, I'm not going to go in, you know, a different way. I'm going to try to follow my values. So they give me the direction with which to act, but they're also the treasure because when I act within them, it feels good, right? So how cool would that be is that if I know the things that are most important to me, I both am given suggestions about direction and right then and there I'm rewarded with that sort of love and good feeling that happens even when we're in the midst of catastrophe, calamity, chaos.
So you mentioned before about when you have something like a medical diagnosis or some kind of stressor, it makes things a lot harder. A lot of our community is struggling with medical issues. Can you speak to that at all? Like, how would you recommend people start with finding a group like yours, or how could it help them, or anything that you feel fits in that?
We've worked with men who've gone through lots of different life experiences and things. And the first thing I would say is, and I've seen this, I actually started part of my career in Vermont working in hospitals and working with sort of lots of intense diagnoses and whatnot. And what I have witnessed for years is if we know what's really important, if we are, and I mean explicitly, I call it a values compass, and I have guys fill out the directionals on a compass, literally on a piece of paper, and you know, tape it to the front of their phone so that they not only can look at it on their phone, but have to literally move it to get to their phone, so it is front of mind. When you're aware of your values, and I don't mean the sort of vague, ethereal, general values that we often have, like, oh, I care about the environment. That's lovely. But I'm talking really specific about the things that are most important to you. When you're aware of those things, even amidst scary, big diagnostic, you know, challenges, then you know, like, all right, I really care about this thing, then I'm going to do that. I can be more fulfilled and I can live in a way that, not that I have no regrets, but rather I can live knowing that I'm living my own life in a way that I could be proud of. You know, my guys, I might even, if they're listening, they'd be rolling their eyes because I say it a lot is, you know, when you finish an engagement or an interaction with a kid, a partner, a friend, can you walk away feeling proud of yourself? Right? And so when there's a medical issue, we're always going to be stressed. Watching individuals in my own life who have had these things. My grandfather passed in the spring, and he passed at a very ripe old age, and also, because of that, deteriorated. And that's, I'm not comparing that to any sort of medical diagnosis, but I am watching, in watching him, here's a man who, as a model for me, knew his values, knew what he believed in, knew what he cared with, and did right up until the very end, to the point where he was ready. Not ready in a sense of like, I'm at peace, I can disappear into the ether, but rather he was able to say what he needed to say and do what he needed to do in order to live the life that he wanted, all the way up to his moment, his final moments. And so when it comes to diagnoses and challenging medical issues, I think having a community, and this is where a group like mine, I think, would be really beautiful, is, again, these aren't your friends. Our friends have to be concerned with what's the right thing to say and what can I do? And I have to do something, right? This is a community of guys who aren't your friends. I mean, they may be friendly and they may become your friends, but they're not as concerned about the right thing to say, because in our community, we support each other. What do you need to hear? How can I help you? Can I send a text that just says, how are you doing this morning?
Castle Biosciences is a proud sponsor of This I Believe podcast. Castle's innovative uveal melanoma tests provide valuable information about the risk of your eye cancer spreading to help you and your healthcare team individualize the management of your disease. To learn more, visit castlebiosciences.com.
So building these communities is essential, as is building a mindset of, I call it, I say the magic is in the muck. And when we're stuck in the muck, as hard as that is, as overwhelming and scary and hopeless as it may feel, if we have that mindset, we can find treasures and we can find joy in the muck. And that's hard. I'm not trying to minimize anyone's struggles or issues or challenges, but you can. And it's beautiful when it happens. I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. It's a little more stressful when you've got a big medical thing over you. And so I think that connection and that sense of community is even more important when you're in one of those situations. So I think it's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, the ideas of, stress and all of what happens when you're managing diagnosis and all of the treatment and all the appointments and all of those things, if we're looking at our everyday as an adventure. And again, I never want to sort of say that flippantly. It's a real challenge. Life is hard, particularly when you have hard diagnoses and medical issues. And so I don't mean to diminish or minimize that. And yet we all carry mindset. The way we go through life and our perspective is a mindset. And so when we can start to adopt a sort of adventure journey perspective to the way we look at life, there's real joy and treasure that can come out of that.
And it might not be the epic quest that you had hoped to be on, but it is the one you find yourself on. So, yeah, at least if you have the right mindset, you can look for that magic in the muck, which I love that term. I think that's perfect. Because you are in the muck. It's mucky and it's icky. And there can still be great things, and, you can get past it and inspire other people around you, and you can come out on the other side of that quest. So I'll stick with the theme and be the hero and come back and be like, I did it. I kicked cancer's butt. I'm over it. And you can be the one that inspires that next batch of people that unfortunately are coming in to deal with what you just went through. So I think that it's so important to know that you have that mindset and you have that ability to shift your mindset, because a lot of times when that diagnosis comes, your mindset is not pretty, but you can shift it, and it's not easy. And again, we don't want to say that flippantly. It's not easy, it's hard. But if you do, you can find those little magical moments and you can create something amazing out of it. I think that is the takeaway there. And so I think that is, I hate to use the word important again because I feel like I just said that 3 times, but it's so important. Our mindset is huge. And, we talked a little bit, we briefly touched on your mental health affecting your physical health. I don't know if you want to add to that, but I feel like that plays right into that.
Oh, more and more we're learning how that is not just a, a flippant, we're using that word a lot, but it's not just a flip saying, right? The mind body connection. We're learning more and more how that is so very true. I had a mentor once years and years ago say that the worst thing that the medical world did was cut the head off the body. And this idea of we're separating mental health, emotional health, physical health. My favorite example, and I don't know the exact details, so I can't give a study on it, but they have found nervous cells, brain cells in our gut that respond to anxiety and depression and brain chemicals. I'm blanking for words right now. So when we say we have butterflies in our stomach, that's real, like physiologically real. And so the way that our stress and our mindset and the way that we look at and engage in the world impacting our physical health, it is very real. And so, I don't think you can think yourself well. You can't like meditate and have a big cut in your arm disappear, right? Like we're not looking at the force or magic, but certainly I have seen, often I've seen it a lot where working on our nervous system, whether it's through cortisol, adrenal relaxation methods, things like that, by doing that, our immune system gets better. Our ability to withstand and withhold stress can increase. All of these things that can only do well. It can only do better for us if we're practicing these things. And yeah, I would start to repeat myself because I do feel very strongly about that. The way we take care of our bodies impacts our minds and vice versa.
I agree. And I think that when you talk about mental health, there is a physical component of mental health. Like you mentioned, you have the serotonin and all of that stuff that, affects your physical being is mental health.
Absolutely.
So there is much more physical to it. It always is crazy to me how medical professionals will tell you, oh, stress is bad for your body. But then they won't say, but happiness is good for your body. And how can it go one way and not the other?
Yes. It's not even as much happiness as it is contentment, or again, going back to a mindful mindset, right? Happiness comes and goes, right? Like something good happened. I'm happy. I'm done with it. I'm not. Like it varies so dramatically. And yet, again, if we go back to magic is in the muck, well, when you're in the muck, you're not going to be happy. That's not the goal. You can be stressed, you can be challenged, you can be upset, you can be scared, but you also can be content. You can know where you're at. You can be grounded. You can be foundationally like solid. And that isn't necessarily happiness, but it is strong mental health that will help you get through. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I love that. I think that's such a good way to look at it. And I'm going to use the word again. It's important. It's so important.
As we're talking, I'm thinking about family members that have gone through challenging diagnoses and real physical health journeys. And without question, every one of them who managed to imbue this sort of mindset, and it's not just positivity. I'm not at all saying like, well, let's just think positive and we'll do better, right? It's not about that. But this mindset of, life is a journey and I'm on it. Right? And all that comes with. My family members that I'm thinking about would not have used that language, but when they have that mindset, they had a good physical health journey. It was hard, it was scary, it was painful, it was, all of those things. And yet, I'll never forget it. I had an aunt, and, when we talked on the Zoom, her eyes lit up, right? And she was happy to be connected. This is what we said earlier in the conversation, but the level of connection, I believe, is incredibly healing. And, men in this culture are more isolated, more and more isolated. The idea of loneliness and disconnection is incredibly harmful. And so while we build connections, that is for all of us, for anyone for anyone, period, particularly for anyone going through, physical health, challenging diagnostics, connections are going to be healing. They're helpful in healing.
Absolutely, I completely agree. And you know, surround yourself with those people that are a positive influence because you know how you feel after you've been with people. There are those
Yeah.
people that you feel uplifted and your cup is running over and you just feel better. And then there are people that you leave and you're like, oh man, I have a headache. So make sure
Yeah.
that you're choosing those right people.
Absolutely. And to add to that, this is actually part of the curriculum and the model that I use is we have agency. We can, I often say we can write our own story. And so, as you're saying, surround yourself by those people you feel good with. That's a challenge. That's hard, right? Like if Uncle Joey comes by and you're like, I don't really feel good when he's here and I don't want to have to tell Uncle Joey not to visit. Maybe right now you should or could or might or get someone to help. Like maybe another family member can be a part of I need to be in a space where I can maintain my own contentment and self-awareness. And again, I'm hesitant to say positivity because that can get a little overused, but to be in my space, my healthful space, right? I really like what you said. I'm going to surround myself by people who support that. And with agency, with authorship, I get to choose who the other characters in my plot line are.
And sometimes you might not get to positivity, but you might just keep from spiraling into negativity, and that's okay. That's, just as good, I think, sometimes.
Yeah. And I mean, let's go even further is sometimes we spiral into negativity. So when we do, that's when our connections can be helpful. That's when having that values compass can be available, right? Having all these strategies and these self-awarenesses, right? It's okay. Like you've spiraled. Okay. Let's see what happens there. Wake up in the morning and have a cup of green tea and move forward. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, and your epic quest for that day can just be pulling yourself back up out of the muck and back to your foundation. And that's an epic quest sometimes too.
Sometimes just getting out of bed is an epic quest. What are the basic tasks in your life? And yours is different than mine, and mine is different than, someone else's. And so it might be, today I'm going to get out of bed and eat. And if that's the case, then celebrate it. That's the other part is all great adventures begin and end around a table. If we think about some of the greatest movies, they're often, started being plotted at a table and finished with like some celebratory feast. Well, you know what? If you're having medical issues and eating is fraught, well, then, yeah, it might be just actually having something to eat is worth celebrating. And that's beautiful. Let's do it.
Absolutely.
This is where, through narrative and sort of some of this journeyman work, is becoming increasingly aware of the impact that dominant stories have on us. If we look at what are the prevailing stories for me, like I said, I work with men and fathers for what it is to be a man or what it is to be a father. And some of those are lovely. I'm certainly not like, insulting or putting down all of masculinity at all. I think I think men are awesome. But if we look at what are the guiding narratives and stories about, whether it's men, whether it's parenting, whether it's people with a diagnosis, right? Like what are the stories and expectations? If we're aware of those things, we can choose to stand against them, or we can choose to step in a different direction. And so most of us, when it comes to these overarching dominant stories, they're sort of like a whisper of culture in the back of your head at all times. And if we're unaware of them, we just follow, and not in a bad way. I mean, that's kind of what humans do. We organize our lives through stories and narratives. But if we're not aware of them, then who's driving the bus, right? Like, I'm mixing metaphors here, but I think that it's really powerful to be increasingly aware of the stories that impact you so that you can drive the bus.
That totally makes sense to me. As soon as you're aware of things, then you can start to understand it, and then you can start to take control and change. And so that tracks, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And the added thing, which I have found really powerful, is when you're aware of dominant stories and you become aware of them, you also start to become aware of other stories that have been pushed aside. And so when I notice, men are supposed to not show their feelings. I mean, this is a sort of overwhelmingly used one, right? Like men are not supposed to ask for help or directions. Or when you notice that that story is so powerful, and then you look at it and you're like, well, but I asked for directions. I'm an exception? All right. Or who else are exceptions? What are the other narratives that have not gotten enough play or that have been brought into the light enough because these dominant stories are overshadowing? They're literally oppressive to other ways of being. And so I would challenge, right? If you are struggling with a diagnosis, well, what does society say about people with that diagnosis? And do you have to follow that story? Right? And whether it's being a male, a man, or a father, or anyone, we can choose to author and live our own stories. And what is a challenge, it's also very freeing.
I love that. I think that's perfect.
I would just encourage, if anyone who's listening to this and they want to learn more or see more, to please, I would encourage them to get in touch. Awesome.
Okay, so where can somebody find you if they want to join your program or reach out?
There's a couple things. One is right now at JourneyMen, it's just me. So if someone sends me an email, they will get a response that is not automated and not written by someone else. They'll hear from me. And so my email is jason@nourishedconnections.com. If people want to learn a little more about the work I'm doing, it is www.journeymenfoundation.com. And I would say I'm on socials that people can learn a little more about my life and the way I engage and talk with people. So I'll send you the links, but I am on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Those are the three that I'm most frequently on. And what I would say is truly feel free to anyone who's listening, if you have questions about these concepts or whatnot. It's obviously something I like to talk about. So reach out. There's no pressure or high sales to join my program. I just want to share this information because I think there's a unique and powerful, different way to look at sort of men and going through everyday life as an adventure that I think would help most people. And so the last thing I would say is, but if people are interested in the fathering program, the last link I would give is connectedfathers.net. And that's a direct link to the program that I run.
Fantastic. Well, we will link all of those in the show notes. And I think that is pretty epic of you to be here sharing this information with us. So I hope that everyone else watching has an epic day on whatever quest you're on, because I know we are all on a quest. It's all different, but it's all a quest. So we just want to say thank you for tuning in and watching, and I hope that you find some magic in your muck today. Thank you so much, Dr. Frishman, for being here with us. Thank you for all that wonderful information. And to everyone watching, thank you for tuning in or listening. We are on YouTube. Please subscribe there. You can also find the audio version on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else you get a podcast. Please follow us in all of those places. We really do appreciate it, and it really does help. And then if you would like to go to our website, acureInsight.org, there is a button at the top to subscribe to our newsletter. We would love for you to do that. We send a newsletter out every month that gives you the latest updates, events, and all kinds of great information. Please join us Tuesday nights. We have a Tuesday night Zoom meeting that can connect you with other OMIs, and it's a great sense of community, which if you listen to this podcast, you know we appreciate some community. So thanks for tuning in, and we will see you guys next time.